Hey, everybody, welcome to the Daily Self Publishing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Sutton. I said my name wrong. Look at that. I was going to say your name. I'll start over. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Daily Self Publishing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Sutton. I'm here with Mel Studer today. Mel is the author of College Bound, the ultimate list of conversations to help your teen through high school. We're going to be talking about her book. She's got it there if you're watching this on YouTube. If not, she just held it up. It's a beautiful cover. Go look it up. And Mel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. It's been a while. We scheduled this and then I couldn't get on your schedule and then I don't know, we postponed it or whatever. But yeah, here's my book again for anybody that missed it.
Yeah, I love that. I love the cover. It looks really good, professional. It's eye catching. And so I've done about 50 of these podcast interviews in the last couple of months. So it's been kind of busy. So I'm glad to finally get you on here.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what you do in your business and, why you wrote your book.
Okay. Yeah. So I, with a friend, started a blog a few years back, maybe 4 years back. And in the course of that, and it's for parenting teens. And so in the course of that, of course, we both were doing a ton of research and trying to find answers. And that all started with when our kids became teens. And the more we talked about it, the more we thought, well, we should do this to help other people. Cause there's so many places you can look and you can find answers, but we wanted people to be able to come to one place and get as many answers as possible, without having to look too much further. And not that we answer all the questions, or know everything, because obviously that's not possible. Anyway, and then in the course of things, it became just my own blog. She had some family stuff. And so about 2.5 years ago, I just decided I should gather some of this stuff and create a book. So some of it came from the blog, but a lot of it just was in notes of things that I had been made aware of through research or had tried on my own. And it's all about having conversations with your teens, which is my huge focus. Is I think a lot of times parents of teens don't realize how important they are in their kids' lives, and the kids start to shut them out. And I think a lot of times we let them because we think, oh, that's natural. And it is, but there can be a balance. And I feel like we still have so much to do, even though they are already teenagers. So talking is a huge connection point, I think. So that's where it sort of started with the blog, I guess, and then came from there.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, I talked to a lot of people and they're like, I was writing a journal, or like I said, we were researching this topic, and it's like, hey, we've learned so much. Let's share this with the world and help other people. So
yes, definitely. It was a sort of a mission, because I feel like a lot of times parents of teens also, until you are in a moment of crisis or like massive problems, like you're not looking for answers. When you have a baby, you have 1 million questions. And even when they're still toddlers in preschool, elementary, there's so many things. But I think a lot of times you think, oh, I got this, when they become teenagers. And there is a whole nother slew of, and in my opinion, larger problems. We're talking about dating, we're talking about driving, we're talking about life decisions. And I almost feel like you should have more questions as the parent of a teen than you do as a parent of a baby, even though you do have
right.
9 questions then too, naturally.
Yeah, my wife and I just always tell people we're winging it. We didn't know how to raise one kid. We don't know how to raise 2 kids. And so we just keep going and try the best we can. I love that. So College Bound, list of conversations to have with your teens. So what are some of those conversations that you go into in the book of what, parents should be having with their teens?
Right. So it's sort of set up as conversations. And obviously 14 conversations is just the tip. But I cover terms you should know, especially that's the one section that I would say is purely college, because most of it has to do with loans or FAFSA, that kind of thing. But then once you get into the actual conversations, they could be applicable for anybody's teen, whether they're going to college or not. I cover things like extracurricular activities, like how that's going to look on your resume, whether you go to college or not, because for future employers are looking for your resume as well. I talk about budgeting. So a lot of people get, send their kids to college and then they're like, well, wait a minute, they keep asking me for money. Well, if you haven't talked about that kind of thing before they leave, that's kind of natural because they've always asked for money, maybe. I talk about getting what's the best way to get letters of recommendation and why that's important, whether, again, you go to college or not. You may need a letter of recommendation to apply for a scholarship, or if you're applying for a trade school, a lot of the opportunities that are available for teenagers after high school they're going to request a letter of recommendation. Talk about how important GPA is. And again, that's important whether you go to college or not. If you decide to just go straight into the working world and you've got a, C-D average, they're going to think, well, they didn't work at school. Why would I think they're going to work here? So It's really a lot of these things are important regardless of what your teenager decides to do.
Okay. So I love that you're teaching the kids how to do the hard work and the work that they need to get done to be successful in life. And so we'll bring that back to your book. I know there's a lot of hard work involved in writing a book. What was the hardest thing about that process for you?
I think whittling it down to what I felt like was the most important. And the title was it's a long title. And I guess I chose the word college because I felt like that's a very searchable term, but I stress both on the back of the book and in the intro and in conversations when I'm talking about it on podcasts or whatever, that it really is truly conversations you need to have with your teenager no matter what. Coming up with once I found College Bound, I just sort of played around with my subtitle. I just thought, well, okay, what is it really about? And and then I think I'm going to stick with the bound, BOUND, like at least I have two more in mind to follow suit with that, and then with a longer subtitle.
Yeah, I love it. I love that because College Bound. Okay. So we know people are going to college, but what's this about? It invokes curiosity and wanting to learn more. And then the subtitle tells you what's in the book. So, I mean, very much classic what you should do with the title, subtitle, evoke curiosity and then tell us what you're going to tell us. Because if you tell us something in the subtitle and then your book doesn't do it, well, then you're probably going to get some bad reviews and people aren't going to want to buy your book. So I love that it was, I think when we write books, especially if it's a situation like you, Mel, where you researched this for so long and you wrote all these blogs, well, you probably could have written a 1,500 page book when it was all said and done. But it's really let's figure out what's the most important and give that out to the world.
Right. And that was my struggle. I started, I thought I'll just do 10. But then in the course of that, a couple split off because I didn't, I wanted to really be super focused each time I talked about a conversation. So it was sort of a matter of ultimately, and I know they say you should use an odd number, but since that number wasn't in the title, I thought, well, 14 is going to have to work because that was like, once I had those conversations written, I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I think that's it. And I think when you're playing around with that, especially with nonfiction, I think you just have to figure out where you're going to stop. Because obviously, there are a million conversations that you could have with your teen or your child. And another thing that I think is deceptive about it is, and this is something I've tried to stress too, is I may need to play around with this, but I really feel like a lot of this information is good for middle schoolers, upper elementary, because a lot of the things that I encourage parents to do in these conversations is just to talk and to set a precedent, to get in the habit of doing this. And the younger you start it, ultimately, the better it's going to be, because if you've established this practice when your kid is 11, 12, 13, and obviously you can start when they're 17 or 18, but it's going to be so much easier if you start when they're younger. And we had talked with our kids when they were younger in elementary school, like around grades and stuff. And we would talk about what the next sport was, or, those kinds of things. And we kind of drifted away from it, especially with our older son. We're like, oh, he knows the deal, and he was getting good grades. Then all of a sudden he was in middle school and he was a mess. And so we sort of thought, okay, what in the past have we done that has sort of worked? And he was a kid that was a talker. He's our only one of the three. But we thought, okay, well, let's go back to conversations. And it worked so well with him that we sort of kept it up with the other two, who they may not be big talkers, but that connection really needed to continue to happen. And that's sort of, so writing this book started really when my oldest son was 13, and he'll be 24 this summer. So I think I even refer to it. I mean, I think it was like a 7 years coming kind of a thing by the time I actually published it. But people kept saying, well, you should write a book about this, because they would say, well, ask Melanie. And so that's when I thought, well, I guess I could write a book. I'm writing a blog, so.
Yeah. What kept you from publishing it so long? I mean, was it fear or what?
Well, yeah, absolutely fear. And just that imposter syndrome, that you're like, well, who am I? Because I am not an expert. I don't have a master's degree. But then the more I thought of it, or thought about it, I guess, I taught elementary school for 9 years. So I know a lot about kids. Then I taught 9 years of preschool. So I know a lot about little kids. And then honestly, about a year after I published this, now I've been teaching middle school. So all of that had sort of added up. And I think when I went back and started teaching middle school, that's when I started thinking, okay, I have a lot to say about this. It had been about a year since my partner had quit the blog, and I had sort of taken a year to just decide, like, is this really what I want to do by myself? And I thought, yeah, I own this message. I have a lot to say, and people don't have to listen to me, and they don't have to agree with me. But if I can help anybody along the way, and my kids aren't perfect. I mean, they have believed me. I have 3 boys, and I've seen a lot of things, and teaching middle school now, I could tell you that I've seen, it's been a year. So, anyway, I feel like, and that's something as a new author, I think you're really proud and you're excited and you publish, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, no one's going to read it. No one's going to care what I say. No, who am I? That, all that kind of stuff. And eventually it does get better. I wish I would have known now, or then what I know now, because I think my book, I mean, I've sold quite a few, but I think I would have sold even more if I had just right off the bat just gone, okay, yes, you need to listen to what I have to say.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really good. Guys that are listening to the podcast today, is listen to what Mel's saying, like, imposter syndrome, fear. I'm not an expert. I don't have a master's degree. So what? None of that matters. Like you said, this is your message. You have to own it. And, this is what you were helping people with. Obviously you have experience teaching preschool, grade school, middle schoolers now. I think it's important to get over that imposter syndrome, because we all have it. We're going to have it whether we are the lowest person in the expert pool on this subject or whether we're the number one person. So, and if you don't believe that, go listen to all the best speakers and authors. They all go through it. So it's very important to do that. I'm glad you talked about that. So you got your book, you published it. We're over some imposter syndrome. We're getting better. How are you using your book now to grow things and share your message with people?
Well, that's kind of the great thing about having a book, is it's like a calling card. My goal, well, teaching full-time makes it a little bit more difficult, but I try to pitch at least one podcast a week. Now it's the end of the school year and I've sort of backed off on that, and I'll pick it back up when school is out. But my goal was to be on one podcast a week, whether it was, put out, published, or whatever it is that you do with a podcast. is then and I feel like it's something I can put right off the bat on my website. It gives me a little bit more authority, like, even though and again, who am I to say anything about anything, but it lends a sense of authority to you or whoever you are. And so I create a media one sheet. I don't know if all your listeners know, it's like a sheet that has like your headshot and then information about you. And as I've been on podcasts, I've tried to keep it updated. And so if I pitch myself to a podcast or to another blogger or to whoever, I can say, look, I've done this. And it really authenticates to me too, like, wow. And I've started like a Google Doc, like every time I'm on a podcast and it is published, or a radio show or whatever, I've started to really get a list. And now I'm like, okay, wow, people care and or are interested, one of the two, hopefully, just trying to build my audience. I really am passionate about what I'm doing. And so hopefully, like I said, hopefully it helps somebody. If I can help one person today, I'd be super happy, because teenagers are tough creatures.
Yeah, I don't have any yet, but I've been around a few, and I've been one myself, so I agree. I love that you talk about, the media one sheet. I think that's a good thing for us to talk about for a minute is, so I've done over 200 or 300 episodes of podcasts at this point, and I've done 40 or 50 interviews for this one. And it's always nice to get a sheet from somebody, because then you get to know them a little bit better. And, because you don't know most people before you do a podcast. It's not like you've been friends on Facebook or in real life forever. And so, guys, if you don't have one, that's something you need to look into doing. And you can do it on canva.com. If you don't know what that is, it's a free, just amazing tool for anybody. You can create book covers and PDFs and infographics and all that stuff. And we'll actually link to a blank template in this podcast in the show notes. So you can go and like just pull it off of Canva and create one on your own. I'll leave a sample of mine. And if Mel doesn't mind, we'll leave an example of hers for you to see, because that's another thing when you're going to look to promote your book is, okay, you want to be on a podcast, but like you said, Mel, nobody really knows you. Nobody knows me. I'm not going to say we're nobodies, but we're not super famous, obviously. And so when you go to get on a podcast and promote your book and your business, the more professional you look, the more put together, the better it is. So.
Right. And it's a great way to like incorporate your branding. Like that's something I've really tried to become better at in the last year. So for instance, there's a way on LinkedIn to create yourself a banner, and all you do in Canva, again, I love Canva, is type in, LinkedIn banner. And so then it's got my color, and I'm not really a pink girl, but it is bright and friendly. And so I just sort of thought, okay, I'm just going to go with the pink, because I have like 3 main colors for my website. So then I did it for Facebook, and then I did it my book really is not of my branding, because I hadn't really done it before then, but it's sort of incorporated into it. And my media one sheet has all of that.
Yeah.
And again, like I would poke around, and like if you are I'm in a couple of Facebook groups where we for our authors, and if anybody posted their media one sheet, I would look at it and think, okay, how could I? So I sort of worked on mine for quite a while before I actually, and even before I had even spoken on anything, you still have, because of your book, you have something. So in the beginning, I had no links to any podcasts. But then as I got one, I added it in there and re-downloaded it. And, you just have to use what you have. And obviously, like if you have a website like I do, that's on there. I have all my social links, YouTube and Facebook and blah, blah, blah. So, and then the more you can connect your branding, they're like, oh, that's her again. There's that pink or whatever, so.
Yeah, absolutely. To all my book bosses out there listening, guys, listen, what Mel is saying is 100%, like, you need to do this, because we have one of my clients I'm working with right now. We just went back and changed all of her social media stuff to match her new book cover. We had it matched to her website, but then when we got the colors back on her book, it was slightly different. I said, okay, now we're going to match social media, post your one sheet. We went and changed all of our one sheet back to the colors. And you know, like you said, Mel, you have a book. So if you have a book, maybe that's all you put on your one sheet. You put your picture, a little blog about you, you know, some question, a little blog, a little intro about you. You put some questions about your book and your profession that would be great to answer, things you're passionate about, and then you put a big 3D image of your book on the bottom. And
Absolutely.
I mean,
And
if nothing else, you have a book.
right, you have your book, and just do a little, like, beef up your bio, you know, like at first I was like, well, I'm just a teacher, but honestly, as a teacher, parents want to know, like, well, how'd you get my kid to sit still? Well, hello,
Yeah,
I expected him to. I mean, you know, there's just things like, so I thought, well, that is my authority as well, as I've been in education for almost 30 years, and I've been a mom for almost 24 there, you know, and so I mentioned my kids, I mean, not really by name, but I feel like that's part of my authority too, is I've
sure.
raised two into their 20s and they're still alive. So that's like a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I have a 9 and 7 year old, and I feel like just keeping them alive is an accomplishment every day.
Hey, that's the end of the day. They're in bed and they look
Yeah,
sweet and you can go give them a kiss. That's amazing.
that's right. That's 100% for sure. You know, guys, listen, you are an authority, and like I said, Mel, you're helping people with kids, and so you're a teacher. Well, who better to help people with kids than teachers? That's all you do all day. You eat, sleep, and breathe teaching, and so you have to own that authority and that expertise, and then go speak, because like you're not going to get on a podcast talking about bowling. That has nothing
No.
to do with what you're doing. So you're going to show them your one sheet, and they're like, I don't want to talk to Mel. She doesn't know anything about this. But if you're going to like what's it today, self-publishing, or we're talking to a parenting podcast or whatever, they're going to be like, yes, we want Mel because this is what she speaks to, and you just spin it a little bit. Today we're talking more about the publishing process. In a
Right.
parenting podcast, you're going to talk about your book.
Right. And don't be scared to pitch yourself out there. It's been so, to me, when I first started doing this, it was like, I was scared, like, who's going to want to talk to me? But I feel like, first of all, everybody that I've met through podcasting has been so much fun. And
Yeah.
you're just talking. And like you said, you, like, honestly, in the beginning, I was only pitching parenting podcasts, but then I thought, well, everyone has an audience. And as an author, as a self-published author, like, there were so many things I didn't know in the beginning. And so I thought, well, that's another way I can help. And so if somebody puts out there that they're looking for guests and I can like tweak whatever I'm doing, then I'm like, well, it's more exposure for me, and I'm
Absolutely.
getting to know someone else that's new and passionate about what they're doing. And so yeah, ultimately you want to reach like the right kind of audience, but truly, what is that?
Yeah.
Because I bet a bunch of your listeners are maybe parents, and maybe they'll think, well, maybe I'll check her out, and then I've
Yeah.
got a new follower that, you know,
Absolutely.
I write newsletters every week to encourage parents and give them a challenge. And I just, again, if I can help somebody, you know, throughout this process of parenting or writing or whatever, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, guys, if you're listening and you have a book, please reach out to podcasts. Reach out to me on bookbosspublishing.com and let me know if you want to be on this podcast, because I love, there's really, I mean, if you're a self-published author, then you probably qualify. So, you know, let me know. But really, you just have to be brave and take that first step and start reaching out. You know, I've been able, Mel, to interview a couple of people in the last year that are millionaires and have amazing networks, and just
Wow.
like, I would never get to meet. And they've been just as honest and humble and pleasant as anybody. So we're all just people. So I love your message in that. Give us some tips on, you know, if I'm just starting out to write my book or I'm scared, what would you tell me?
Well, if you have the idea to write your book, then I say 100% do it. Like, even if you never publish it, get your thoughts out. Like, how special is that going to be for maybe someone that comes across it later, like your spouse or your children? So, and if you're passionate, like, you know, I could have been passionate about bowling. You mentioned that earlier, and maybe I'm like the best bowler ever. And so that's what I'm going to write my book about. So if you are passionate or know anything about anything, you're going to be probably one or two steps ahead of someone else. And that's the thing that I kept thinking, okay, so I do have older teens now. And that was the thing and that's another, I encourage parents to find a mentor. So like if you're in the book writing business, find someone like us that is a step or two ahead. Ask questions. I am in 3 or 4 writing groups on Facebook. And like right now I'm not even writing because I'm teaching. But I always get good ideas and I say, I love that feature on Facebook where you can hit the 3 dots at the top and save it. And I've got 1 million categories. Because when I have the time, I'm going to go back and say, okay, today I'm going to look at this, everything I've saved in this little, whatever you call it, section or category. Because I learn stuff all the time. I just think that's what's really fun about writing is you even though you are passionate or something about something, you're going to learn even more. And so, yes, I say do it. And just a little bit each day. Like I didn't have time. I was a full-time mom. I had 4 part-time jobs. When I started, I wasn't teaching back. I wasn't back in the classroom yet. And, sometime most days I would find, a little pocket of time. My kids are a little bit older now when they're younger, but there's voice to text or there's so many tools now that you can employ, but find 15 minutes a day, get up 15 minutes earlier. If you really are wanting to do this, then you need to find time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love those tips. Those are amazing. Mel, I think this interview has been great. And I think it's just really, it's been an honest, admission of you can do this and don't be afraid. So I love that because I think we all need to hear that.
I swear.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people that all the time. If I can write 6 books or 7 or however many I've written now, anybody can do it. So I love that. Mel, tell us a little bit where we can find you and if we want to learn more about what you're doing and get your book.
Okay. Yeah, my website is www.parentinghighschoolers.com with an S at the end. I'm on YouTube. The links to all of it is on my website and I can send them to you too, but I have a Facebook page. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I pop in and out of all of those. I'm not real great about being consistent on any of them, but I do send a weekly newsletter to all my parents and my list is right at 800 and growing and just, we're all in this together. So let's help each other out.
I love it.
I still need help too. I still talk to like my young adult kids. I'm like, now I'm at this new stage and I'm like, okay, well,
yeah.
What do I do? Now what, let's figure this out. So
awesome. Great. Well, Mel, thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been a pleasure and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks.